Leaders of Tomorrow, the only daily show on Indian television dedicated to you, the MSME entrepreneur. We connect you with the right experts to ensure that you get the kind of empowerment that you need. Today on the show, we're talking about hiring right and the cost of not hiring right. Let me introduce the panel that we have here with us tonight. First up, Imrana Sheikh, Vice President HR at Asian Paints. Next up, we have Agamjeet Dung. He's the Senior Director Executive Access. And finally, Simon Desjardins. He's a co-founder of Shortlist. Thank you all so much for being with us here to talk about what's really happening in the market when we're talking hiring, when we're talking HR policies, and what some of the trends are, particularly for small businesses. As always, let me come to the entrepreneur first on the panel. Simon, you run a company that's using technology with the hiring process here in India. So just very briefly, talk to our viewers about what it is you do at Shortlist.
Thanks, Sunanda. So Shortlist helps growing SMEs to hire better. And we do that using technology that actually helps assess candidates on their competencies and actual ability to do the job before they're interviewed. Essentially, we're helping to move the market away from this old world that relies on CVs and pieces of paper that don't actually predict performance to a world of demonstrations of competence. And we think that technology can play a very powerful force in doing that.
Okay, you made an interesting point about moving away from CVs. I'm going to get the opinion of the rest of the panel on that. But first up, we love data. There's a data point which we have found quite interesting, which says that of the National Career Services portal, which has been launched, of nearly 4.2 crore CVs that have come in, the jobs were less than 1/10 of that which were up for grabs. Is this because this is India and therefore you will have 100 people applying for every one job that's available? Or is this something else that we should be looking into seriously? And let me come to the two of you, and Simon, you can also join in on that.
You've asked a very fundamental question, and the good news is that the portal initiative has been taken, and there is free registration, transparent statistical data that's available for us to make these codes. So that's the good part of it. Areas of opportunities for streamlining this portal are many. For example, the awareness, the sheer awareness of the portal itself needs to be improvised. Second, the user interface of the portal needs to be improved so that you can navigate for the right skills that you require within the portal. And third is that the availability of quality talent. In that 4.2 crore database, there are only 29 lakhs that are graduates. And no wonder that only 0.29% of the organized sector is present on the portal.
Okay.
Very valid point mentioned by Imrana. But to me, I think demand generation will never be a problem in our country. Thanks to the demographic dividend that we have, I think every year the amount of workforce that will enter will only keep going up. So while there will be platforms and tools and bridges, I think the crux of the problem lies in skilling them right. To me, I think it's from demand generation to making them ready to enter the workforce. I think that's where the next battle has to be.
Okay, so all very interesting points that have been raised, and I want to come back to what you started this discussion with, to say that you are looking at moving beyond, your company is looking at moving beyond just the CV. But my question is India ready for that model? Are small businesses ready for that model? And I want to ask the three of you this, if we are ready for that model, then what perhaps is that model that we should be looking at?
So Sunanda, we're here in India because India is so full of talent. It's bursting with talent. And one of the big issues is that talent just can't be matched with opportunity in efficient and effective ways. We've worked with over 130 companies now, and we can tell you that they are indeed ready for the use of technology. The trick is that the technology has to be user-friendly and accessible, as opposed to a lot of the technologies that we've seen in the past, which have actually made things more complicated than simpler.
Okay, so is what Simon does then, is that a very small percentage of what's happening in the industry, or is that becoming a trend?
So technology is indeed, creating huge amount of changes in all functional reinvention, including HR, including recruitment. When there are large number of CVs and you have a technology interface which just allows you to sift through, and so for example, earlier if you had 500 CVs and it would take so many man days of the recruitment team in sorting those CVs, versus you have a technology platform that sifts through and filters the right candidates and brings them forward to you, you're going to save a lot of time and become much more effective as a team.
Okay, so I think there are 2 points here. Basically, one is, of course, when you're saying moving beyond the CV, it is using technology. But the second part of the question, and maybe Agam, if you could speak on that, is the fact that it's not just what is on a piece of paper anymore. It's not just, you know, your skill sets where you've studied, etc. Is the industry moving to a new model where they're looking beyond just that?
Unfortunately, not to that extent. I think 2 points here. I think CV itself, you know, while Simon is trying to solve a brilliant problem, and trust me, I think that's a huge problem to be solved. But in my mind, a lot of people don't even know how to make their CVs, right? A lot of great candidates just are rejected because of a bad CV. You know, you've spent 10, 15 years, 20 years of your work life, right? And you want to position them in the best possible manner, and people don't do that. And unfortunately, the ones, you know, who are helping them do are also just industrializing it, right? And, you know, there's no one solution, right? I mean, I am very different from him, right? The 2 CVs can't be the same. We are different people. So first, the point that I made, you know, while technology is solving a great problem, and I think at mass levels, the country at which, you know, the size of the country that we represent, I think there's a huge problem to solve. But first, I think the country, or let's say the people, should make better CVs, first point. Second point, you know, which you made, I think CV only gives a part of the story, right? You are much more than a CV. In my mind, I think, you know, when you hire people, you don't hire people for the functional qualities that they bring on the table. To me, it's about more. It's about Imrana saying that these are the 3 things that I want in the person, X, Y, Z, in that order of priority. Can you go and find me the best person,
sure,
right? That a CV will never tell you.
Okay, you made a very interesting point in terms of, you know, most people don't even know how to write a CV. So let me ask the 3 of you that and pick up on that. What perhaps are the 1 or 2 things that you think everyone should have in a CV? And I do know that you look at, you know, the CXO level, for instance, but if you can, you know, give us an industry perspective, what are the 1 or 2 things that you would like to see in a CV that, you know, will tick the boxes for you? And on the flip side, what are 1 or 2 of the most common mistakes perhaps that you all see in CVs? Let me come to you first.
Okay, I think the experience needs to talk. The CV needs to highlight those. Achievements or experiences need to be highlighted as well. These are the 2 things. Experiences and achievement, I would say, are definitely very important, and the recruiters pay a lot of attention towards what's written and how it's written, and quantifying it as much as possible. 2 things that I think CVs need to kind of, you know, the don'ts that you need to take care of is simple, you know, like errors, grammatical and spelling errors. I think it just reflects and, you know, resonates something which is unsaid. You just expect something to be perfect.
Because you have spell check, of course.
Yeah, you just have to be perfect. Yeah. The other is the shorter it is, the crisper it is, the easier it is to make a mark. Sometimes people do get carried away and believe that a 4-page or a 6-page CV is better than a 1-page or a 2-page CV. So the shorter, crisper it is, more impact it creates.
Okay, so 1-page CV, Agam, in your opinion?
Slightly different there. I think 6 is not an answer. 1 may not be the solution. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree to her point that you know, your life story should be covered in as crisp a manner as possible. But to me, I think very valid point that she said, achievements and responsibilities, right? A lot of times, fundamental mistake that people do is my responsibility becomes my achievement. So for example, I lead a team of 300 people. That's an achievement. No, it's a responsibility. I mean, that's the role that you represent, right? Versus saying that I delivered X, Y, Z in my roles, right? Now that's an achievement. So very clear articulation between what are your, you know, key responsibilities that you drive and what are your key achievements. One thing also, I think, you know, which I see a lot of times, and that's what I tell a lot of my candidates, right? A lot of times people, you know, have 10 or 15 years in a job, right? Now that's a great thing. Would you love, you know, somebody with 15 years in a company? You would love their longevity. But people are not able to show, you know, what really happened in those 15 years, right? Now that is very different than 3 stints of 5 years each, right? And people a lot of times are unable to articulate, you know, some of those finer nuances, which I think a CV should capture.
Sure. How about you, Simon?
I certainly agree on the achievement part. I think what a lot of candidates forget is that an employer typically spends less than 20 seconds reviewing somebody's CV.
Wow, okay.
So if you're spending less than 20 seconds as a candidate, are you thinking, what actually is that employer going to read? Is my CV full of acronyms that my prospective employer has no idea what they mean? So I think a lot of people lose their train of thought and try to write a life story in 3-4 pages.
Sure.
It'll never get read.
Okay.
Right.
Sure. Two of you on this panel look very closely and work very closely with technology. So my question to the two of you is, for businesses that are hiring for new age, companies, technologies, etc., AI, cloud, SaaS, virtual reality, is it very different when compared to, say, the manufacturing sector? And if yes, for companies that are in this business that are perhaps looking at hiring candidates, what should they be keeping in mind? What should they be doing differently?
That's a great question. So one type of role, for example, that we see a lot of new age companies hiring for are data analysts. We're seeing this across the board, from manufacturers who are hiring for that to technology companies that are hiring for that. Those sort of skills need to be assessed in a fundamentally different way than traditional skills. And the advantage is that a lot of those skills can be actually tested for online. We can actually tell a lot about a candidate, and we should know a lot about a candidate in terms of their actual ability to do a job well before we spend time interviewing them. Interviews are expensive and they take time, and we're still in a place where we bring in candidates for a technical role like a data analyst or a user interface designer, and they show up to the interview and they have no idea, they cannot perform a particular task in the interview itself. There's no way we should be wasting time on that anymore. We need to develop, and we have developed at Shortlist, ways of testing for those competencies and skills well before an employer wastes time interviewing them.
Okay, do hold that thought. This is turning out to be a very fascinating conversation. We will continue this on the other side of a short break. Just stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, India's only show dedicated to MSMEs. Tonight, we're talking about hiring right. Agam, give us an industry perspective on that question. How are things really changing? What should companies be doing differently?
See, I think experience-based interviews there is probably a better idea. In my mind, Simon absolutely, made a very, very correct remark that, a lot of times those things are discovered at the nth hour, right? Whereas I think there are better ways to test the functional capability. So for me, I think the functional capability part can be done sans an interview. But I think what never changes and should never change is, once you've got the right person with the right functional skill sets, how do you, choose and differentiate between two people with equal functional capabilities to say which one is better for me? I think that's where the interview still will play a role.
Okay, so we were saying hiring right. Let me flip that around and saying the cost of not hiring right. There is, of course, I'm assuming the time that you've spent trying to hire this person. There's the amount, the cost that you've incurred in trying to hire this person. And I want to ask the three of you this, maybe your tips for our viewers in terms of if you haven't made the right decision and you haven't hired the right person, how detrimental that could possibly be for the business. And what do you do in that situation?
Sure, so top performers, we know, perform in orders of magnitude more than average performers. So a top performing salesperson, for example, might perform 3, 4, sometimes 10x better than an average salesperson. So it's extremely important that we get this right. And what we typically see, though, is SMEs that place time to hire as the most important metric. They're trying to do this as quick as possible. Actually, what we always counsel our clients is that we should be looking at quality of hire first. It's worth waiting another couple of weeks to get the right hire, as opposed to measuring your HR team or measuring your hiring performance as how quickly can we hire somebody in a particular role.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I think time to hire is a metric and it should remain a metric, but more importantly, it's about who you hire. So I think 2 data points here, and again, that'll be probably more relevant to the CXO space that we tackle too, but still, amount of mishire and time taken, and the cost of mishire. Global studies indicate that the complexity of business that we live in today, amount of mishire is 1 in 2. And I'm talking about very large organizations. 1 in 2 is a mishire. And the cost that it takes at senior levels, the cost that it incurs the company, is anywhere between 26 times to 100 times the candidate's compensation.
Sure.
Now that's a very, very scary data point.
Yeah.
So I think that these are some of the things, which also I think corporates and MSMEs and everybody I think should look at. It's not about how quickly you get somebody on the table. It's also about who you get on the table, and what that person can do to you.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I think while you specifically spoke about the CXO level, but on average, another study of SHRM talks about just the replacement cost, not the opportunity cost, just the replacement cost of a candidate is going to be 6 to 9 months of salary. So I think one of the things that definitely helps is that to understand that recruitment has a science. And it's a science which can have multiple techniques which will help you to kind of make the right decision. So the kind of behavioral interviewing skills that you use, the kind of tools you use to assess the skills that the person is bringing to the table, and the fact that it requires time, there's no shortcut.
Sure.
You're making a decision basis, what the experiences of the other individuals are. So there's no shortcut. And third is the landing in the organization is very critical. There are a lot of failures. I think there's another study which talks about 40% of new hires fail to succeed in the organization because of a wrong landing. So I think it's very important to take care of the human interfaces, not just when you're hiring a person, but also during the transition when the person is settling in your organization.
Okay, so that's an interesting point that you've made. I also want to, of course, talk about companies in India being equal opportunity employers. Do you think there's enough understanding of that? It possibly is happening at companies like yours, companies of your size. But for smaller companies, do you think there's enough understanding of that, Simon?
We're seeing increasing interest in diversity, which is great news, and particularly in the larger corporate space, but we're starting to see it in some of the more forward MSMEs as well. The issue is, though, how do you do it? And we actually think at Shortlist that technology can play a great role in helping to remove the bias from the process, which is one of the core reasons why we actually don't see more diverse teams. The data tells us, and we all know this, that diverse teams perform better. People perform better when they can be themselves in the workplace. And we need better tools, though, as hiring managers to make decisions about who's actually best suited for the role. How do you help a hiring manager remove their own bias? And if we're able to then use technology to give objective data points about a candidate, can they actually do the job? Then I care a lot less whether they're a man or a woman. I care more about are they the best candidate for the job?
Okay. For someone who's watching this show to say, yes, businesses are changing, the industry is changing, the people coming into businesses are changing, I need to ensure that I have the right person who's then going out and hiring these people. And so a question to the three of you, how do HR professionals, how do people in your industry then ensure that they're on top of the game when it comes to ensuring that they have the skill sets to hire the right people?
Yeah. I think one of the first things that the HR people are learning and need to learn a lot at a lot more faster pace is understanding business. Because at the end of the day, you're hiring for the business. And if you're not able to understand the business needs, you may not be able to make that marriage happen. And hence, it's important to understand the business realities, which are exponentially changing. Second is that there's a lot of data and technology that is available. But if you're not able to understand how to leverage that technology, then you're not really getting the necessary ROI. And so that's the second part. Third is that there are newer ways of doing things. So for example, today you can use social media. You hear about Spotify being used and not just LinkedIn for hiring. So there are a lot of other tools. Somebody in the Ola yesterday who met me told me that he hired somebody by just sharing an Ola cab with the person. So there are
opportunities everywhere.
Opportunities everywhere. So the HR people need to have a constant open mind to grab these opportunities which are available all around them.
Okay, I will give the two of you as well a quick word before we wrap up.
Sure. I mean, the other thing I would say to that is, as HR professionals, I think we need to keep our eye beyond just the Indian marketplace, and that some of the best practices in hiring, of course, are outside of India right now, which is one of the reasons at Shortlist why we keep a presence in Silicon Valley, because some of the best technology and some of the most innovative systems and processes to hire are currently happening not necessarily all at once in India. And so I think it's important to learn from companies and from best practice employers that might be outside of the country.
Interesting.
I think for us, it's also about understanding our industries and our clients better. I think as search consultants and professionals, I think it's very important that we are able to understand the other's point of view and to really understand that, what's happening in that domain, right? And then be able to, marry that with, the candidate pool outside and see, if we have people, who really understand those things much better, right? A lot of times, we might be good at what we do in terms of finding people, right? But I think it's very important to understand those industries and the complexities that the clients are facing, because that helps you, then go and have that first level of conversation with the candidates and filter at your end, because now you know them much better.
Sure.
So I think it's for me also about a lot of learning and understanding your clients in the industries that you work in much deeper, not only at surface levels.
All right, Agam, Imrana, Simon, thank you all very much for your time here tonight. If you have any feedback on the show for us, we love hearing from you. Here's how you get in touch. leadersoftomorrowtimesgroup.com is our email ID. Tweet at me personally at Sunand_J or LOT_ET now is our official Twitter handle. You can also reach us on our Facebook page. Leaders of Tomorrow and ET Now is how you get in touch. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good night.